Welcome to this beautiful program today. My name is Joshua Oludare Oluso. I will be your moderator for this show for this afternoon. As you know, the African Portal, your one-stop media house, is all about African ideology, African language, and African concept. And that is what we stand for. We've been coming and we have gone through the test of time, but grace and praise to God for giving us another privilege, another beautiful day today to be on this show. It's 2 minutes after 2 o'clock here in Pretoria, South Africa. Thanks to everyone listening to me. One of the favor you can do for this show is to share this show around. Let it go viral. Send it to friends on your list and make sure you'll be part of what we are doing in the African Portal. For those of you that would like us to promote or to sponsor our program, you can call me on +27 703 3584 is number to call. Join the conversation with us. You can also drop me a message on my email address, the African Portal at exclusivemail.co.za, or you can speak to me in all social media. I'm on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter, on all social media. You can communicate with us. It's a beautiful afternoon time here in Pretoria, South Africa. What we'll be discussing today is things that have to do with migration in Africa and the challenges that is facing African migration. Why are we migrating? What exactly is the problem? Why the African have to migrate from their continent to another continent of the world? What are the challenges? What are the things? What are the pushing force that is pushing people out of Africa? That is what we'll be discussing. And at 2:30, we'll be having one of our own in the studio as well, Sheikh Orelope will be joining me where we'll be continuing with our program called The Journey of Life. As well, by 4 o'clock, we'll be having another program, Karakata. That is the program that you cannot miss, where we'll be promoting all the small scale businesses. Come to this radio station. Let's do it together. Let's use our own to promote your own and let us be the voice that we announce you to the world. We are the voice of Africa, the lion voice, the African Portal Radio, where everyone have a say. I'm so excited today to be on this show today. But before I go further, let me just give you a clip of what exactly is going on in Africa and the history of African migration before we continue with the conversation. Let me quickly open these clips for you so that you can have understanding of what I am talking about when it comes to African migration, challenges facing Africa, and things that we need to change in Africa, most especially when it comes to terms of people migrating from one place to the other. It's very crucial that we talk about it, and it's very crucial that we actually make sure that we enlighten people about it, because a lot of people in Africa seems not to see that they say when it comes to migrating, there is a rules and regulation. People have been doing this many years past. Migration is part of womankind, is part of our creation. Remember, Africa migrates all the way from Egypt before we migrate to Sahara Desert and all the rest. So the migration have been part of our life. But why is it that the migration become the center of problem that we are losing a lot of African citizens? Those are the things that we'll be discussing on this show for today. So let me quickly bring this video into this program for us to have the understanding of what I am talking about. Thank you very much for those of you that you are watching this program. Please, for those of you that are watching this, we are taking this clip from the YouTube, and kudos to the people that upload this uh, clip. We give the reference to them. We are using their clips to educate the African continent. So thank you very much for joining this conversation. Let's quickly see what is going on this clip.
Countries
Thank
of
you
Nigeria
very
and
much.
Cameroon
Let's
around
quickly
3,000 to
have a
5,000
look
years
and
ago,
see.
and either overpopulation greatly impacted sub-Saharan African demography in the past 2,000 years, they'd probably state the slave trade or European colonization. However, long before the Europeans or Middle Easterners or Chinese had visited the continent of Africa, major changes were taking place. The people of sub Saharan Africa are divided into a few major groups, but the largest of which would definitely be the Bantu peoples, a loose conglomeration of nations stretching from Cameroon to Mozambique. But this, of course, was not always the case, and the rise of the Bantu people is a fascinating but generally unknown subject to many Westerners. The Bantu languages today are a branch of the Niger Congo language family, a truly massive grouping that also takes up most of West Africa, and I will admit that I've been guilty of incorrectly lumping them together in the past. However, the Bantu are definitely distinct for a number of reasons, and today we're going to discuss the expansion of the Bantu throughout Africa and the various empires and modern day nations that have descended from this event. The general consensus is that the Proto Bantu peoples originated somewhere near the border of the modern day countries of Nigeria and Cameroon around 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, and either overpopulation in the region or a lack of fertile soil drove them southeast into the Congo Basin, that being the modern country of the Congo. This is comparable to how the Italic people spread across Western Europe and their descendants became the modern French, Spanish, and Italians, or how the Slavs spread across Eastern Europe, becoming the Russians, Serbs, and Poles. However, the Bantu people were not initially united under a single language like the Roman Empire, and hence their movement was a combination of conquest and assimilation, similar to how Southeast Asia was previously inhabited by a race of people very distinct from the Austronesian settlers that migrated from Taiwan. But who exactly were the native peoples of this region of Africa before the arrival of the Bantus? There were many diverse groups in Central, Southern, and East Africa when the Bantus arrived, and although the exact distribution of peoples is not entirely clear, Central Africa was mostly inhabited by Pygmy peoples, most of Southern and East Africa by the Khoisan, and the Nilotes inhabited parts of East Africa as well. The Pygmy people are noteworthy for their extremely small stature when compared to other Africans, with the various Pygmy groups still existing in the interior of the Congo, although they no longer retain their original language, instead speaking Bantu languages with a large amount of influence from the pre-Bantu Pygmy languages, and even to this day the average Pygmy is less than 4'10". The Khoisan have inhabited southern Africa for a mind-boggling amount of time, with some estimating that they've been in the Kalahari Desert for well over 100,000 years, and they are genetically and physically very distinct from Bantus and other Africans. The Khoisan still exist on the southern tip of Africa near the Cape of Good Hope, and some language isolates in East Africa have been classified as Khoisan, although their inclusion is dubious and requires further analysis. The Nilotic peoples possibly inhabited the majority of modern Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, although they're still in great abundance in South Sudan and parts of the previous three, and it's been suggested that their language is possibly related to Bantu and other Niger-Congo languages. They're notable for having nearly pitch black skin, as well as being some of the tallest people in the world. As I've mentioned in previous videos, the average Nilote is over 6'1", giving a stark contrast to the neighboring Pygmy people of the Congo. Now, the Bantu expansion did not entirely eliminate these people from existence. As I've mentioned, they still do exist in pockets and regions in modern Bantu territory, and additionally, it was very common for the incoming Bantus to mix with these various groups during their march southeast, and hence many Bantu may have significant admixture from the previous peoples. For instance, in South Africa, the Xhosa people, I hope I'm saying that right, a Bantu group most closely related to the Zulu, have on average 30% Khoisan admixture, and many from Kenya and Uganda might also have Nilotic admixture, and additionally some might even have Cushitic admixture from the neighboring Horn of Africa. The Bantu established many empires and kingdoms along the way of their expanse, including the Congo Kingdom, the Empire of Great Zimbabwe, and possibly most famously the Zulu Kingdom, one of the last independent African kingdoms to be annexed by a European power. There are currently 20 countries with a Bantu majority in Africa today, with around 300 to 600 individual Bantu ethnic groups and languages throughout these countries, and I'm going to name all of them for you right now in alphabetical order. No, I'm just kidding. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the more noteworthy groups in the continent. And since many of these countries don't have an ethnic or linguistic census, it is a little difficult to determine the exact distribution of people, with the area being one of the most linguistically diverse in the world. Because some languages may be mutually intelligible with each other, they may or may not be considered the same ethnic group. For instance, in Rwanda and Burundi in East Africa, the dominant language is Rwanda-Rundi, spoken by some 20 million people. However, the major groups in both countries are the Hutus and Tutsis, both of which speak a dialect of Rwanda-Rundi, yet are considered two very distinct peoples. Some of the groups with a more concrete identity are the Xhosa and Zulu of South Africa, who number around 8 and 12 million people respectively, along with 10 million Shona people in Zimbabwe and Mozambique. Also, keep in mind that because of the borders of the colonial era, many ethnic groups might be spread across multiple countries, while other groups that were previously at odds with each other might have been boxed into the same territory, leading to a bit of a conundrum for the modern people of these countries. The Swahili coast in East Africa has been greatly influenced by many different outside powers, being the only Bantu region where the dominant religion is Islam. Arab traders had been visiting the Swahili coast for well over 1,000 years, and even ancient Greek and Chinese cartographers were aware of its existence. After the death of Muhammad in the 7th century, many merchants and traders from Arabia, Oman, and the Hadramaut settled in this region, and the resulting trade language became known as Swahili, which is fundamentally a Bantu language, however, is occasionally written in the Arabic script, especially in Zanzibar and the Comoros Islands, and has a significant number of loanwords from Arabic and to a lesser extent Persian. Swahili has since become the lingua franca of East Africa, and although the number of people that can be classified as ethnically Swahili is only a few million, the majority of Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda have learned Swahili as a second language, numbering close to 80 million people, making it by far the most extensively spoken Bantu language. It would take around 2,000 years for the Bantu to finally reach the edges of the continent after their great trek through the jungles of the Congo, with many historians estimating that the Bantu people may have reached the southern coast of South Africa a mere 1,500 years ago, although the Cape was generally only inhabited by Khoisan peoples at the time of European contact. However, this was not the end for Bantu expansion, as there are many people with full or partial Bantu ancestry outside of this region of Africa. There is, of course, the huge African diaspora in the Americas, mostly in the United States, the Caribbean, and Brazil, although only around 20% of the Black American genome is of Bantu origin, and similar percentages for the Afro-Caribbean people in English-speaking countries, seeing how most of the slaves brought to North America were from West Africa, not Central Africa. However, a much higher proportion of Black Brazilians' DNA is of Bantu origin rather than West African, as many of the slaves that were brought to Brazil, which was a Portuguese colony, were from Angola or Mozambique, which were also Portuguese colonies. There are also moderate numbers of Africans descended from Bantu slaves around the Persian Gulf, such as in southern Iran, Iraq, and Oman, who were brought to the region in the 8th century AD by the Abbasid Caliphate from East Africa, as well as a small community in Karnataka and Gujarat in India known as Siddhis. Although they do not speak a Bantu language, virtually the entire population of Madagascar off the coast of Southeast Africa have Bantu DNA from Africans that migrated to the island and mixed with Austronesians from Southeast Asia, as well as Arab, Portuguese, Chinese, and Indian traders to a lesser extent. And the Malagasy language, which is decidedly Austronesian in origin, has a large amount of influence from Bantu languages. Additionally, the small island nations of Mauritius, Reunion, and Seychelles in the Indian Ocean also have large mixed-race populations, mostly of Bantu stock, and the Chagosians from the island of Chagos, now known as the British Indian Ocean Territory, are also of partial Bantu origin. Although the largest genetic contribution to the South African Cape Coloreds is of Khoisan stock, a significant amount of their DNA is from Bantu sources, as well as the other mixed-race groups in the area. There's also a growing diaspora of more recent immigrants from Bantu countries all around the world, as well as internal migration within the region of Bantu inhabitants, with there being an especially large influx into South Africa from neighboring countries in recent years. Overall, Bantu peoples total over 400 million people, about 40% of the continent of Africa, and 6% of the human species, making up an extremely vast and diverse assortment of people, stretching from many areas of the African continent and many countries. Oh, and fun fact, the highest proportion of albinos in the world is actually among Bantu people located around Lake Victoria in the middle of Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, with there being around 150,000 albinos in the region who have more or less formed their own communities due to ostracism caused by local superstition. The Bantu expansion really did completely change the face of Africa as we know it, and without this event, the countries and people of sub Saharan Africa would have looked very different than they do now. Go ahead and let me know your thoughts on the Bantu expansion and the many Bantu nations and people that inhabit Africa and beyond. And as always, thanks for watching, everyone. It's been Mason, and I'll see you next time.
Philosophy
Thanks
diving
to
down,
everyone that
flat back to
actually
look
see that.
forwards,
Thank
step
you
back and
very,
think
very
down
much.
and
It's
look
great
forward.
time here.
Motherhood
Victoria, South
means
Africa. Thanks for being
changing
part
into
of
a
what
new
we are
version of
doing
myself
here.
that
And
I
thanks for
didn't know
joining us
existed
on this
before.
Inside, you're
special
like,
program
yes,
where
yeah,
we
but
bring
you know,
ourselves
outside.
about the journey
Being
of
nurturing and
Africa,
just having your
what we
arms
are
like
facing
this
in time past
completely
and
and
where we are and
different
what
sides like
have
that.
It
happened
is
to
so
us
much
and what
fun
are
to
the
be a
things that we
parent,
need
like
to know about the
drawing and
African
building.
culture and about things that is happening here in Africa is what we'll be discussing on this program. As you see the clip that we just showed to you, that is telling the journey of African from one place to the other, how the Bantu generation moved all the way from the West Africa between the border of Nigeria and Cameroon, and how they migrate all over. The Bantu generation today are one of the most dominated tribe here in South Africa. Why are we doing this program and this video? Is we want to enlighten ourselves as Africa so that we know where we're coming from, we know who we are, and we know our originality. Because there is a saying in Africa that say, if a child doesn't know, or if anybody doesn't know where he's coming from, it may be difficult for the person to know where he's going to. Our uniqueness is one of the things that we need to embrace, and our culture, our diversity is one of the beautiful things that we need to keep as Africa, and we need to embrace that. But let's talk about the migration, why people migrate from one place to the other and what caused that migration. There's nothing wrong with migration is part of life, is part of what women being have been experienced from the day one of their life. But the only problem with migration is the migration that is happening today, that people are using a desperate route to cross, to other parts of the world, that people are risking their, they are risking their life to pass to the other part of the world. That is what we'll be discussing today. And what are the pushing force that is pushing people out of Africa? One of it is economy. Most of the migrants today, they were economy migrants. So a lot of people are migrating out of Africa due to the problem of the economy in Africa. And a lot of people have been, have crossed to the other part of Africa due to one of the challenges in some areas, which is maybe economic problem or the war. Try, maybe some are religion wars, some are tribe, between the tribe to tribe are having problem. Some are civil wars. A lot of things like that have happened in Africa that have made people to migrate from one geographical area to the other. But let's just see that as one of the points that is making people moving out of the Africa to other parts of the world. But let's look at the economy problem that is one of the big issue that is really pushing people out in most parts of the of part of Africa. A lot of people are facing challenges economy wise, and this is one of the things that makes some people to zero their mind to go through the dangerous zone or dangerous route to cross to other part of the world. Let's look at it from the area of people, going through from West Africa down to North Africa to cross to the other parts of the world. A lot of African citizens have lose their life on Mediterranean, all in the name they want to cross to the other parts of the world to have the better life or to have a good life for themselves. And what are the solution to this? One of the solution to this is African leaders or African government needs to sit down and have a common system that can work, a workable system that will help the African citizen to believe in their own land. That is number one. Two is the African leader needs to create a workable system that will make people to be economically empowered. We need to empower people in Africa economically. When people are empowered economically, there will not be any reason for them to cross from their geographical area to other parts of the world. If there will be reason, or if there will be any reason why people need to migrate, that will be between themselves. As we can see in the history, when the Bantu generation, when they are migrating, they migrate in between the Africa, and they spread to the whole part of Africa to develop the part of Africa. Migration is good. Migration is one of the greatest things that can happen to human being. But the challenge that we need to correct, or the problem that we need to address, is how people migrate. That is very important, so that we will not keep on losing the African citizens. I remember I read an article from one of the scholar in Irish. It's an Irish scholar, and he talked about the migration, and he's talking in the is talking about the future of Africa, that if Africa citizens are still risking their life to cross through Mediterranean to the part of the world, he say he pity their next generation. And that is my focus. What are we doing to let the incoming generation believe in African ideology and in African land? That is very, very important, because if we don't address that, it's very possible for our next generation as well to face a lot of problem when it comes to migration. Yes, migration is good. People need to migrate. People need to move from place to place. People need to move from one place to the other. People need to move from city to city. But people doesn't need to go through a route, a dangerous route, a deadly route, all in the name of migration. So that needs to be addressed, and we need to let people be empowered financially and economically. Because if we empower people economically, that will give them a feeling of belong, and they will realize that, okay, no, this is my land. I will not leave my land for anything. I will not leave my country for anything. I will not leave my state for anything. This needs to be applied to every sector and every part of Africa, not only people migrating from African continent to other part of the continent. Even within the Africa, you can see like a place, let me use a place like here in South Africa. A lot of people are migrating from Pumalanga, from Limpopo, from Mabopane, for all other cities, migrating to Johannesburg, all in the name that they believe that Johannesburg is only place where they can succeed or where they can make it. So they make that environment or that city, it become too congested, that because everybody is moving down there, then we all just focus on one city, and before we know it, the city become too congested that it cannot contain us anymore. And that is happening in most of the countries in Africa. If you look at Nigeria, for instance, as well, it's part of my case study, we say everybody wants to come to Lagos. Everybody wants to leave the village. Every graduate wants to come to Lagos because they believe that it's only in Lagos they can get a white collar job. We should have a system that can let people have the feeling of belonging into their home state and their home province, so that people grow up or graduate in Limpopo, they can as well reside in Limpopo and develop the economy of Limpopo. And people born in Ibadan as well, for instance, in Nigeria, can also, based in Ibadan, develop the economy of Ibadan. Not that people born in in some geographical area, like in a rural area, they want to move to urban area, and that is causing a lot of problem. Yes, migration is good. It's good that people need to move, but not that the percentage of people moving is more higher in Africa. Look at how many thousands of Nigeria that have moved out of the Nigerian life. These are the people that they will have one good thing to do to economy of Nigeria. But today they were economic migrants in other place of the world. These are the things that we'll be discussing on this radio program. Remember, the African Portal is for Africa, is where we discuss the issue that have to do with Africa. African Portal is for everyone, is where every African have a say, where everyone have a say. We represent African ideology, and we develop African content, and we believe so much in African ideology and African languages. And that is why we are encouraging us as parents, as African parents, wherever you are. Maybe you are in the diaspora, maybe you're anywhere you are in the world. Make sure that you impart your language and your culture into the life of your children. Language is different to culture. Don't let us mix the two together. A lot of people think that some languages belongs to some culture, and because of that, because I'm Christian, and the one of the dominated language in Christendom is English, and they believe that, okay, let's just be communicating in English to our children. No, that is advanced colonization. Some people, because they are Muslims and they believe that the dominated language in Muslim religion is Islamic, and they want to impart Islamic into their children. No, what about your own originality, your own language? Let us first embrace our language first. Let's communicate to our children in our language first. Because all these languages that we are embracing today in Africa, someone actually sees sense in those language, and someone promote those languages before we saw it, and before we now embrace it and make it a means of communication, a medium of communication in Africa. As well, Africa needs to have a system whereby we have our own unique language that will connect us together, a language that will connect every African together, so that we can be able to communicate as well in our own language, in our own modern tongue. This is very, very important. This is what this video is all about. We will continue from there tomorrow. Remember, we start from yesterday. We talk about the independence of South Africa. We give you some background of what are the things that have happened in South Africa in time past, and how people migrate, get to South Africa. And we also talk a brief about the independence. And we also host one of the South African citizens based in Nigeria and doing well for himself, Bry. We also host him last night on this radio station. Thanks to those of you that believe in what we are doing. My name is Joshua Oludare Oluson. On top of the hour, we'll be bringing another program to you, which is Journey of Life. I want you to join me again. Let's have the conversation together. And that program is very packed, because we have a lot of scholars that will be coming on that program to discuss the issue of Journey of Life. I would like to hear from you. Kindly call me on +27 703 3584 is number to call. If you want to email, you can send an email to me at the African Porter at exclusivemail.co.za, or you can as well send message to me on Facebook, on Twitter, on all the social media. My Twitter handle is Dari Oluson the on Twitter, and on Instagram is the African Porter on Instagram. You can follow me in any of the social media. Let's have a conversation. Thank you very much. For you that you have businesses, or you are at home and you are scared that your business is going down, this is a platform that you can use to promote your business. Come and advertise what you are doing on this radio station. We will promise you that the whole Africa will hear about what you are doing. I would like to hear from you. Thank you very much for those of you that are sending me messages already. I've been receiving a lot of messages on WhatsApp. Thank you very much. I will not be able to treat that now, but at the end of this series, we also give a room for people to call in to put their own input. What do we discuss today? Let me just do a wrap up before I call it a day. We're talking about African migration, why people are moving from one place to the other. Migration has been part of our life, and we cannot erase it. And we talk about the challenges facing Africa when it comes to, the pushing force, the things that is breaking people to leave Africa to other parts of the world. And we also talk about the challenges that people are using, the dangerous routes to cross to other parts of the world, all in the name of looking for a green pasture. There's a lot that been said in this program and in the clip, but if you have interest in what we are doing, feel free to call me on the number that I put on the space. Call me. Let's have a conversation around that. I would like to hear from you. Once again, my name is Joshua Oludare Oluson. You can just do me a favor. Make sure you share this video around. Let it go viral. That is only help you can do for this program to go far. Thank you, and God bless you. I remain yours once again, Joshua Oludare Oluson. Shalom. See you on top of the hour for the next program. God bless you. Very good. Bye for now.